Focus of today's daf is Daf Pei Aleph in Zbachim, as we continue learning this same discussion that we had about mixing the different karbanos up. So yesterday we tried to prove what Rav Ashi had said. There were three different opinions in trying to explain the opinion of Rav Lezer, who says that if you have some mechatos and you mix up a little bit of tap water in there, the Chacham say you got to throw it all out. You have to dispose of it. It's disqualified. Rabbi Lezer says you do two zrikas. So we're trying to give reasons why he said that. What's this for? Resh Lakish had said that he does believe that things yesh bila, meaning liquids of like density, easily are they're evenly mixed. They blend well, and you need a shear. But over here, it's speaking about where you had exactly the shear of the shear for zrika was of zrika of the mechatas. You mixed up one tap water zrika with one mechatas. So therefore, if you do both of these, if you do zrikas, you definitely have the amount of mechatas that you need. In other words, that you have a shear. Yesh bil needs a shear, but you're guaranteed having a shear because you have exactly the amount of each, one and one. If you had a lot more of one than the other, certainly if you have more mechatas, and you had a very small amount of tap water, you certainly that would suffice if you had two zrikas. That was one answer. Rabbi gave a different answer, and he said, yeah, you mix some things up, but it doesn't need a shear. The only reason to do the second one is a kanas. Rav Ashi said, no, ein bila, meaning you don't assume that two things like things are mixed up. So we tried to disprove Rav Ashi, because if your things aren't mixed up, how do you say that if you mix a chatas and an ola in our Mishnah? Our Mishnah really said, literally talk about an upper one and a lower one. So it's like mixing up a chatas and an ola. Rabbi Lezer says you do above and you do below. Well, how do you know? Maybe the ola blood went above and the chatas went below. How you're not yotze either one? So we tried to prove that. We said no. He really doesn't hold it. You're yotze the ola. He says it's speaking about where the ola blood was a very small amount, and what you sprinkled above was a much larger amount. We said, example, let's say the chatas blood was 90% of the mixture and the ola blood was 10%, and they don't mix well. But if I took 15% of the whole mixture combination, I'm guaranteed of getting the chatas blood up there. That's why. What about the ola blood? Maybe you're not yotze. Maybe the ola blood went all above. And Itaka says you're not yotze. That's what we wanted. That's how we try to get out of it and say yes. But at the end of the Gemara is saying no. These cases aren't speaking about where there's the cases that you were asking from are not speaking about where the blood was mixed up in the same cup. We're talking about different cups being mixed up. Therefore you can't prove anything from there. Says the Gemara at the fifth line on Daf Pei Aleph is where we left off yesterday. U'abala lo pligi. You're saying this machlok Rav Lezer and the Chachamim is only when the cups are mixed up and not when the liquids are mixed up in the same cup. But Rabbi Yehuda explained the machlok as different than our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said that the Chachamim say if you mix up two of these bloods, you got to throw it all out. That was the Mishnah on Ayin Testament base. The Mishnah said that Les says you do it both. You do up above. Chachamim say no, throw it all out. B'diavad, if you did it, you could be yotze, but l'chachil you have to throw it all out. Rabbi Yehuda learns the machlokas differently, not like our Mishnah. B'atanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo nechgur b'lezer chacham al dam chata shenesar b'dam ola. They don't disagree there. Sheyikra, that you could be makar both of them. Even the chacham say that, not like our Mishnah. The chacham and our Mishnah say you got to throw it out. No, he holds. We had this sheet of Rabbi Yehuda before. He holds that the chachamim agree with Rabbi Lezer when it comes to dam chatas, meaning an upper blood and a lower blood. You mix that. You can mix them. You can be makar both of them. Do above and below. In other words, you'd have to say yesh bila. Otherwise, you're not. That you be yosei unless you give the weird case of the 90% and the 10%. But then you're not really yosei the ola. It's only if you hold the yesh bila. So every drop effectively has both of them in there. So Rabbi Yehuda said the Chum agree with Rabbi Lezer. But Rova Vanirva, if your regular carbon got mixed with a carbon which is not allowed to be brought in this bath, for example, bestiality was committed with it, and there was only one aid or the owner, so you don't kill the animal, you don't have to aidim for that, but you can't bring it on the mizbeach. So everybody agrees there that you can't be makavit because it's repulsive to give a Rova Nirva blood on the mizbeach. Amar what's the Amar nechku al dam tmima shenesar b'dam ola. Dam to me, dam of an unblemished animal got mixed up with dam of a blemished animal. Shablezer Omer Yikrov, Bain Bebol, Bain Bekosos. However, it's mixed up, because he says when it's mixed up, basically the Torah said you're allowed to do it. Bain Bebol, Bain Bekosos, whether it's mixed up with the blood or with the kosos. Here you see he's talking about even both. B'chamam leikriv. So you see over here that he's talking about even when the liquids are mixed up in the same cup, not simply that the cups are confused, that you have a bunch of cups of blood, each one individually, each one unique, but they are mixed up. You don't know which is which. So you see that Rabbi Yehuda says that the machlok is even by bowl. Says more Rabbi Yehuda, Libra Rabbi Lazar Masni Ben Bol. Rabbi Yehuda learns that way Ben Bol Rabbanan, because Rabbanan will say no, they only argue by kosos, like we've tried to explain. Amar Abaya, Lo Shano Ella Tchilas Chatas Va'ola. This that we talk about here in a machlokas in our Mishnah, right? Where we said, Rashi says over here in the second of the widest lines, Hach Plukta Chatas Va'ola de Maslisin. Right? The machlokas, the way our Mishnah reads, that if you mix up chatas and ola blood, so you don't know where to do it, above or below, you're not allowed to do the chatas blood below, you can't do the ola blood above. The chacham say you throw it out. That's only where, meaning, I haven't sprinkled anything yet. I have to sprinkle the chatas blood, I have to sprinkle the ola blood, but I can't throw it out. Listen to this. Let's say you already sprinkled the chatas blood. Where does it go? Above, on the four corners above. And now you've mixed up the remainder of the chatas blood with the ola blood. Now, where does the chatas blood go? The remainder, where does that go? On the yesod, on the bottom. Well, that's pretty much the same place where the ola blood goes below the chota sikra, but not exactly. The ola blood would be sprinkled below the chota sikra, where? But on the vertical part of the mizbeach, the lower wall of the mizbeach. Whereas the shiore chatas, where does that go? On the base. So he says, listen, that's where there's some say you have to throw it all out. Avol sof chatas, you already sprinkled it, but now you're talking about the shiorim, ba'ola, divrei everybody agrees, makam ola, makam shirayim. Well, it's the same thing. Why? Because when you sprinkle this mixture of ola blood with shiorim, the remainder of the chatas blood, they both go below the chut sikra. The chatas blood is supposed to be on the base. Yeah, well, it'll trickle down there. If you throw it on the base below the chut sikra on the vertical part, it'll trickle down to the base, which is which is really projects out from the mizbeach on the horizontal base there. So it'll. Pardon?
Depending on how much you sprinkle.
Well, okay, well, it'll sprinkle. It doesn't. You don't need this. There's no shear for that. It just has to be. You have to be able to see it on the wall. That's what Abaye says. Rav Yosef disagrees. Rav Yosef, no, it's not enough that it sprinkles down, that it's going to trickle down a little bit to the base. It has to be sprinkled on the base. Remember, in the southwest corner of the remainders of the blood, it's got to be there. Some say south, some say west, some say either one. But he says so that doesn't suffice. So he disagrees with Abaye. Then we have a similar machlokas. V'chein Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon also says the same idea that will like Abaye. Lo shanol tchilas chatas va'ola. If you mixed up the chatas and ola blood at the beginning before you sprinkled any of them, avol sof chatas. If you already sprinkled the bein chatas blood and now you have the remainder, the shirayim va'ola divrei hakol makam ola makam shirayim. It's the same thing because it's both below the chut sikra. Throw it on the vertical part of below the chut sikra, and it'll trickle down. Rabbi Yochanan Taim Rabbi Lazar, no, Adayini Machlokas. The Rabbanan disagree with there. Why? Because they say you can't do that either, because you're not allowed, because the shirayim blood has to go on the base, not on the vertical part of the wall below the chota sikra. Okay. So we have this question. Do we say that the makom ola is the same as the makom shirayim? That since they're both below the chota sikra, that's good enough? Or do you say no? The shirayim has to go on the base, not on the vertical part. So we're going to try to prove that one way or another. Masar Rav Huna Bar Yehuda, Pasuk says Kodeshem by Bechor. By Bechor it says they are Kodesh. What does that mean? What does it mean? She'im nisara bedam kodesh machem. Let's say your Bechor animal. Bechor animal is the firstborn shor kesev ways. Firstborn male has to be given to the Kohen, brought as a carbon. If it has a mum, the Kohen gets to keep it without that. If it's a tmura, if you made a tmura of it, the Kohen gets to keep that too. Oh, so he says Kodeshem Shinis Sarav. Let's say, what is the point of Kodeshem? That if it got mixed up with other Kodeshim, Yakrivu, you can be makar both of them. My love, what do you mean mix up? Presumably mixed up, let's say, with an Ola. My love, Sof Ola Bechor. Now, Ola and Bechor, the Bechor is also, every other animal besides Chatas, every four-legged animal gets sprinkled below the Chutah Sikra. So the Ola and the Bechor both below the Chutah Sikra. So doesn't that mean to say that what? That if you mixed up a Bechor blood with a Ola blood, you put it below the Chutah Sikra. So what do you see? That the Bechor blood gets mixed up even with the ola remainder blood, which goes on the, which supposed to be on the base. So that's good enough. Shmamina makom ola, makom kachim. The place of the ola blood is the same as makom shemaim. Makom ola is makom shemaim. In other words, it's all the same because it says if it got mixed up, the dam kachim yikrivu. Doesn't it mean to say even if the sofola, meaning I already sprinkled the main ola blood. Remember the ola blood, you got to be shtaim shein arba, 2 which is 4. What do you do with the shiraim of the ola blood? Again, put it on the base. Doesn't it mean to say that shirayim blood of the ola gets mixed up with the original bechor blood, which hasn't been? You only do one zrika on the bechor. You only need one, but they're both in the same spot. Even though the ola shirayim is on the base, like we said before, the chatas blood is on the base, and the bechor is not on the base. In the bechor, it's good. Shramim no makom ola makom shram. No, tchilas ola bechor. We're talking about who says we're talking about the sof ola, the shirayim ola? We're talking about the original ola. But what do we mean by that? I have an ola carbon and I have a bechor. The ola's got to be sprinkled shtaim shein arba, 4 is rikas, 2 which is 4, bechor 1, but they're both below the chut sikra. And if they get mixed up, you can sprinkle them together on the. They got mixed up, so sprinkle them together on the lower part of the wall. We're not talking about the shiraim at all, right? So what's the chiddush in that? So what's the chiddush? You mix them. Kamash malon the ein olin mavatlan says karbanos are not mavatlan one another. Even though we normally say that everything is batal barov min Torah, not when it comes to kachim. Take a look at Rashi. 6 lines from the bottom of the page, all the way bottom page. The Elam Vatans Eseh, the Afilu Echad Maruba Al Chavero, Lo Batal Hamuad. Even if one is majority, as normally we always say, Achri Rab Lahatos. Min Torah, everything goes according to the majority, not when it comes to carbon. Why? Kodesh Haim. Tells the Kodesh, it remains as Kedusha. The Bechor remains Kadosh, even if it's mixed up with another carbon. It stays its Kedusha. It's still Bechor Kedusha. Even it's not Mevatel, the Ein Olin, Karbanos, are not mavatal, do not nullify one another, even one's a majority. Says the Gemara, okay, that's what you're learning out from Kodesh Haim. Hi, mi velokach midam apar, midam asar nafka. Don't we learn that already on Yom Kippur? What do we say on Yom Kippur? The coin, remember the coin? After he sprinkles the par in the Kodesh Kodashim, right, the dam of the blood. Remember 8, he does 8 there, and 8 of the Sa'ir, does so 16. Then he comes outside towards the Baruch, another 8 and 8. That's 32, right? Total 32. Then what does he do? He sprinkles on the inner mizbeach, Now, how does he sprinkle the inner mizbeach? He takes the dam of the par and the dam of the sword together in the cup, according to one shita. So it puts them together. It says, "V'lokach midam par midam asar." Now, a bull, even though most of us are not farmers, but we all know that a bull is much bigger than a goat. There's a lot more blood in a bull than in a goat. Right? So even though the dam of the blood is the dam of the bull is much greater than that blood, you mix them together. It says v'lokach midam apar midam asoyer nafka. So we learn from there what the one is not mavatul the other because you put them both in the same cup.
They're both hot.
Pardon what?
They're both hot.
Yeah. But the point is that the blood, that one carbon is not mavatul the other. Why don't you say that there's more bull blood than then, and therefore the soyer blood is.
It's a par chatat.
It's a par chatat. Fine, they're both chatat. You're right. Yeah, okay, that's right. Okay, but chatat. But the point is, one's not mavatal the other. That's what he's saying. One that the par is not mavatal the sar. Maybe you'll say it's all par blood. When we say something is mavatal the other, that means that the minority becomes like the majority. Mm-hmm. So why don't you say it's there? So we know from that. Why are you learning out from Kodesh Haim? We already learned it out from Lakam Midam Apar Midam Asar of Yom Kippur. The answer is you're right. You can learn out from either one. So machlokes tanan. We'll see why one wanted to learn one, none of the other. We'll see that in a minute because we're going to have a third pasuk also. Tanoi, it's machlokes tanan. Ikan maslam hacha, ikan machlokes hacha. This idea that ein olim mevatlan zeh, that one carbon is not mevatel the other one, even though one is a majority and one's a minority, is that doesn't nullify the majority, does not nullify the minority, can be learned out either from Kodesh Haim by Bechor, or it can be learned from Lakam Dam Dam Sar on Yom Kippur. Okay, why does one choose one and not the other? We'll come to that in a minute. We're going to come another kasha though. We're going to see this same idea from another pasuk. Masav Rava, the pasuk says by an ola at the beginning of Vayikra, says Vekriivu b'nei Aaron es hadam. They will be makriv the dam, right? That which means that they will take the makabel the dam, they will receive the dam in a receptacle in a mizrak. V'zarku es hadam. And then they will sprinkle the dam. Well, you're talking about the dam. You could have just said they'll take the dam. V'zarku sam. V'zarku so. Why does it say again v'zarku es hadam again? So Rashi has one girsa. The last line of Rashi on the page. The sar of dam ola b'dam ola. How do you know if it gets mixed up with another ola? Or dam ola b'dam tmura with its tmura, dam ola with dam chulin. That's Rashi says, how do you know all that? But the Gemara says a similar idea. Taking a look at the Gemara, in the last line on the page, right? The Zohar says, why does it say dam twice? Matam melomar dam dam. Why does it say dam twice? You're only talking about the dam. It says take the dam and sprinkle it. Why do you say take the dam and sprinkle the dam? We know what you're sprinkling. You says take the dam and sprinkle it. I don't have to say the dam again. Why do you say that? Sheikh, I might think ainli ella elushin asarvu b'tmurasa. Maybe an ola. We're talking about an ola animal there, four-legged animal. Maybe it got mixed up with its tmura. What does that mean? Yeah, what is a tmura? We know this many times. You have an animal A. This is my carbon. Oh, I'd like to make B in place of A. I like B instead. It's a nicer animal. What happens? You're not supposed to, but if you do, they're both kadosh. Now, they're both kadosh. Some karbonos, you're makravit, and ola, you are makravit. Some karbonos, like a bechor, you're not. It depends on the like karbonos of a tzibur, you're not, etc. So, ainli ella, shenesarvu, b'timurasa. Sha'af mechayim. Even if the two ola animals, one's an ola, one's a tamura of an but they're both olas. Even if they got mixed up while they're alive, you bring them both. Tikra minayin l'rabos Torah ushlam. How do I know if the ola got mixed up with a toda or a shlamim? That how do I know that what you're makriv the down there too? Marbani toda shlamim. Why shebon ben because that's similar to an ola because you could bring it as a net or a dava. Remember a toda, a shlamim, and ola. You could just say I'd like to bring one of my own volition. How do I know to bring it that I could marban osham? If an ola got mixed up with an osham, or the ola blood got mixed with an osham, how do I know bring that too? Now an osham you can't bring of your own volition, right? You have to have done some sin. Marbani is osham. Sheton matan dalit kamosa. It needs 4 sprinklings. It's shtaim shein arba, just like the ola, right? What about bechor mas or pesach, which do not need? They are not similar to the ola. Number one, the bechor mas and pesach is not something you bring of your own volition. Those are chiyuvim that you have to bring, and you only do one zrika there. It's not shtaim shein arba. Tamalomer dam dam. So dam dam teaches me, you know what? That even if it gets mixed up with any of these other things, you're marking them all. My love. So again, now we have a third pasuk telling me what? Apparently that we wanted to learn from Kodesh Haim. We wanted to learn from Lakach Midam Apar Midam Asoyer. Right? So we said it's a machlok that I learned. Now we have Vikrivu Bnei Aaron Es Adam V'Zarko Es Adam. Why did it say dam twice? Tell me that if they got mixed up, that you're still makrabit anyway. You bring it anyway. My love. Right, because the zrikas are the same, right? All below the chutasika. My love, sofola ubechor. Doesn't it mean to tell me even sofola? Meaning, I already did the main zrikas of the ola. All I'm bringing now is the shirayim, and I'm bringing a bechor for the first time, even a bechor, and a bechor is one zrika. So even though I'm doing the shirayim of the ola with the original zrikas of the bechor, that's good. Ushmamina makam ola makam shirayim. The same idea that's good enough. You don't have to do it directly on the base. You could do it on the part below the chutasika, and it'll drip down. So it's low. Again, so you can't prove anything to this. This question we had, it's a machlokas, obviously, and Amalaf, we had a double machlokas. Can you be, when you have to do the shrine, can you do it on the lower part of the wall and it'll drip down, or do you have to do it directly on the horizontal part, the base? So what's the chiddush in this again? If that's what you're doing, that you mix them up, Mike Mashmalon, the Ein Ol and Vatmel like we saw. We already said that. Mivalak Midam Apar or Midam Asar of Yom Kippur, we already learned out. So now we have 3 psukim telling me. In other words, in all these cases, we're saying you can't prove anything that the place below the Chuta Sikra is good enough for the Shiraim as it is for the original Zrikas, because maybe we're talking about original Zrikas in both. So what's the chiddush? One pasuk by Bechor tells me Kodesh Haim is Kodesh, even it got mixed up. Yom Kippur Lakam Dam Param say even it got mixed up, it's okay. One's not vatal the other. Now we have Dam and Dam. Telling me also this idea that if the things get mixed up, they're not vatal one another. I already have a pasuk for that. I got 2 pasukim for that. So what's the chiddush in there? My question is, again, it's a machlokes tanoim. Some learn from here, some learn from there. So what's the reason? If I have 3 psukim now, Kodesh Haim, and what? V'lakam dam parmas of Yom Kippur, and dam dam. I have 3 psukim all teaching me the same idea that if you mix up 2 different kinds of blood that have the same as rikas, in other words, not like chatas and ola, where one is above, one's below. All these are below. How do I know that one's not mvatal the other? These psukim. So why? Why don't they learn out? It's the ones who learn out from Kodesh Haim or from this dam dam. Lo Yalfi, they don't want to learn from the pasuk of Yom Kippur of Lakum Midam Parmos, or why? Because Savri Ein Ma'arv and Lekronos, right? Remember we had that before, we had a machlokas. Remember I said you have 16 inside, right? Dam bar inside. Then you have 16 outside towards brachas. Then and you have 7 above and below on the top of the mizbeach hazav and the inner mizbeach. But what about the 4 corners of the inner mizbeach? Remember we had Christians, where does he stand? But he's also 4. Is a 4 separately? You do dam asar 4 and dam par 4, or do you mix it in one cup? So the answer is, they say that's when it says lakum dam par dam asar, each one individually. I take the dam asar and do 4 zrikas on the inner mizbeach and 4 zrikas of the par individually. So lakum dam par does not talk about where you're mixing up the blood. It's just saying you take from this and you take from that, but each one separately. So they say that you don't mix up for the 4 corners of the inner mizbeach. You don't mix that blood. You just do each individually. So you can't learn from that pasuk that the 2 dams are, because then the 2 dams aren't mixed up at all. They're not mixed up. They're not blended together. Okay. Oh, why? So why didn't they learn out the other 2? Why didn't they learn it from dam 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 lo yolef dam dam lo mashmu? They don't have that. It's not mashma that way. It says like, okay, so the pasuk sometimes it says ve'ikrivu. Pasuk says ve'ikrivu b'nei Aaron es adam v'zarku es adam. Wants to emphasize the dam. We're not talking about throwing anything else. They don't hold this drasha that dam is telling you that even if they got mixed up, that's a little bit far out. That's a little bit, you need an imagination to say that we're talking about even if you mixed up, let's say the ola with a bechor or something of that sort. That's too far out. Lo mashmalu. Ella mikodesh hein my timer. Why didn't the last 2 who learned out from the Ikrivu and from Dam Dam, from Lakum Dam Par Moseri and from Ikrivu Dam Dam, why don't they learn out from the Persik of Kodesh Haim, my timer? Lo Yalfi, why don't they learn out from the Persik of Kodesh Haim? It says Kodesh Haim, it teaches me, Haim Craven, Vain Tumuras and Craven. Talking about Bechor, only they themselves could be brought as a Korban. Kodesh Haim is referring to Bechor, and the Tmura of a Bechor is not brought. It's learned out of the Pasuk, Kodesh Haim. These are Kodesh, but they're Tmura, even though it's Kodesh, but it's not brought as a carbon. You don't bring that as a carbon. You wait till it gets a mum, whatever, and the Kohen can eat it. The Idach, Nafku, how will the other ones, the ones who learn out from Kodesh Haim, that what? That one is not Mavatul another, how do they know this idea that Shmuras is not Makav? The Idach, Nafkle, mi imshor imsel Hashemhu. It says who? Who karbein Shmuras Makav? They're the same idea, but from a different part of the Pasuk, where it says what? Where it says imshor imsel Hashemhu, it's Kodesh, and the Tmur is not, the Tmur, the Bechor is brought as a carbon, but the Tmur is not brought as a carbon. Tashma. So let's try to bring it from here. Let's say this is not exactly the words of our Mishnah, but it's similar to our Mishnah. If you have a chatos and an ola, blood got mixed up, and what does the Chum say? Dump it all out, right? Throw it all out, because you can't do ola blood above and chatos blood below. Let's say he didn't ask and he just threw it all up above. Both Rabbi Les and Chum Ramoda, lamata. Okay, once you've done it already, right? So maybe the ola blood went above, but you don't know. But you did the mixture above. You did the mixture above. So the Chatziyos say. So what do you do with the rest of it? The rest of it you do below. Why? Because the rest of it is either ola, which should where it belongs. There's ola blood in there, and the chatas blood is for the shirayim should be below. And there's modem that ola that your yotzei. In other words, you once you've done the above, which you shouldn't do. But if you did it above already, the mixture of chatas and ola, might as well just throw the rest of the blood down below. Because the ola blood that's in there is the right way to do it. And the chatas blood that's remaining also is the right way to do it. My love, the arav chatas for ola. Are we speaking about you mix the chatas and ola? Now, our Mishnah doesn't say that. Our Mishnah doesn't say those words. It doesn't say if you did it above. Right? Our Mishnah just said, according to Chum, vim lo nimlach, v'nasan kasher. It doesn't say how you did it exactly, right? Kasher elyon, daniten, he says the L one is okay because but he doesn't talk about the bottom. So here he's saying, aren't we speaking about where you mix up the chatas and ola? The kivan, the yav lulamala. Once you did some above, havel shirayim. The rest of the chatas is shirayim. Victoria el ve'elu modem. Shiachsavit lamata. Shma mina makam ola makam shirayim. That proves that the makam ola is a makam shirayim. In other words, because it says this Bryce is effectively saying if this is chatas and ola and they got mixed up, and you're supposed to throw it out according to Chum. But if you did it above, if you did some of that above, so you got some ola blood there you shouldn't have, but some chatas blood is up there too because the dam's all mixed up. Behold, yesh bila, and therefore you might as well throw the rest of it below in your yotzei. So what do you see? What do you mean below? Below is on the wall, in the vertical part of the wall. Yet, and your yotzei for the chatas for the shirayim. So you see, makam ola is the makam shirayim. The answer is no. Kiyasar of Yitzchak. So that's your proof. But Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef, Amar no. Amar Rav, they said in Eretz Yisrael, my skin going to Arav Chatos Achitzona b'Shirayim. The gear says Hapnimim. We're not talking about, when we said over here that the two things got mixed up, we're not talking about Chatos and Ola, right? It says over there, what do the Brises say? Toshma, we said Toshma, right? Nasan Lamala v'lo Nimlach. What are we talking about? This Bryce says nothing. What are we talking about? What mixture are we talking about? He says, no, you mixed up chatos of the outer chatos blood with the chatos and inner chatos, like the chatos of pnimim, like param davar shel tzibur, par kol Mashiach, the par and sorry Yom Kippur, right? You mixed up those karbonos. Could go into Arav chatos achitzanav b'shirayim hapnimim. What does that mean? B'shirayim hapnimim. The chatos blood that brought inside the mizbeach, inside the heichal, right? The chatos blood, the chatos minimum, the outer stuff. What are you supposed to do? The first Mishnah we say in Ezo Makomet every day. What does it say in the Siddur? That you throw it on the shiraim on the outer. You put the shiraim on the outer, on the base of the outer mizbeach, on the yesod, right? So you mixed up those two, right? So you mixed up, in other words, chatos of chitzona with shiraim of an outer one. Both of them are going on the base. In other words, we're not talking about ola blood, which goes on the vertical part. We're talking about two chatoses, right? That's what we're talking about in the base. All right. Amalei Abaye, why do you have to talk about where chatos chitzona blood got mixed up with the shiraim of the inner one? Amalei Abaye v'neima marka going to Arav v'shiraim. Why don't you just say the chatos blood, right, that you already sprinkled, got mixed up with other shiraim blood of a chatos? So maybe, no. So why do you have to say it pnimim b'chlal? Why can't you say that you're talking about chatos blood with chatos blood? Says Rashi, why? Because if you're talking about, the advantage here is, see, if you're talking about pnimium, where does it have to go? Where does the dam, the remainder of the chatos blood of a chatos pnimi goes on the closest part, when you come out of the heichal, closest part. There's a machlokas, is at the south, the southern corner, or the western corner? They're both the southwest corner. Is it the south or is it the west? Depending on remember where the mizbeach is situated. We had the machlokas. He says they go over there. But if you're talking about chatos with chatos, outer chatos with outer chatos, says Rashi, take a look at Rashi in the second line of the wide lines in Rashi. Middle. V'leim marka going to Arav chatos chitzonam b'shirayim. Klomer b'shiore chitzona kamosa. The Rav Shapiro say this is better. Why? Shemokim Shirayim Shaba L'Divrei Kol. Everybody agrees there that what's the place of Shirayim when you come out of the Sovev and you come back down. That's everybody agrees that's on the southern spot right there. So there's no machlokas about that. So why don't you just say you mixed up two Shirayim bloods of Chatos? Back in the Gemara, V'neima Mark go to Arav b'Shirayim, that you mixed up the Chatos one with the other Shirayim. To go into the Arav chatos achitzona b'shirayim klomer b'shiore chitzona kamosa. Obviously, we're talking about leftover. Because if we're talking about the original chatos blood, that's got to be above. Here it's below. This is maybe you wanted to say you mixed up chatos blood, right? Chatos blood that had been sprinkled with the shirayim of an inner one. We don't say that. We paskin like what do we say in our Mishnah? In the Mishnah in Ezo Makoman, that you're supposed to put it on the all the zrikas on the inner mizbeach or ma'akiv. If you didn't do all the four corners of the inner mizbeach, it's ma'akiv. It's no good. But if you didn't do the shirayim on the outer mizbeachs yisod, not ma'akiv. But maybe the chiddush over here is afil l'man da'amar shirayim is ma'akiv on inner karbanos, right? But chosru ein ma'akvin. Maybe that's the chiddush, that if something's missing, in other words, you mixed up this shirayim blood of the inner carbon with the shirayim blood of the outer carbon, so some of it is missing when you're doing the whole thing now. Even though something is missing, it's not ma'akiv. Even if you hold that the shirayim of the inner mizbeach is ma'akiv if you didn't do it on the yisod, but not all the shirayim. And even if some of it's missing, it's not ma'akiv. Says Rashi again in the third line, in the wide lines, like mashman, haydukman v'avashirayim and others v'afil leman to amar shirayim is ma'akiv, shirayim apnim is ma'akiv, hanimili kilo yov minayu at all midi avo chosru mikzoson. Right? V'shofech et ashar liyasod da'hacha chasru shem aprimim shenasan demein lamala. That's the point. In other words, we're saying over here you mixed up two bloods: the chatos blood of an outer mizbeach with the shirayim blood of the inner mizbeach. Right? So what did you do? So he says, if you put it above, okay, you do the rest below. But when you put it above, some of the shirayim of the inner carbon got lost because you put it above the chut hasikra where it doesn't belong. You put it above of the outer mizbeach. So even though some of it's gone, as long as you use some of it below, that's okay. That's the chiddush. So he says we're not talking about a chatas and ola that got mixed up, where the ola blood really belongs below the chut hasikra. We're talking about chatas blood. Right? Chatas blood of an outer carbon. They got mixed up with the shirayim blood of an inner carbon, and they got mixed up. You really should throw it all out because you don't know where to put it. But if you did it some above already, you do the rest below on the base. And that's so we're not talking about where you're doing it on the vertical part of the lower part of the mizbeach. We're talking about everything goes on the base, and you can't prove our question at all. Amalei Rava in the Gemara. Amalei Rava Tosfa. So what was his name? Rava Tosfa said Ravina. But what do you mean? On yesterday's daf, we already explained Kimna. We explained Hahi Baru Bel Yonim. There we explained that. Remember, according to the Mandama that we thought Ravashi who said Ain Bila, they don't get mixed up. How do you explain that it got mixed up above blood? We're speaking about where that the two bloods don't blend. So we're talking about where it was 90%. Remember Chatas blood, 10% Ola blood. And you gave 15% of the blood above the chut hasikra, so you know for sure that you got chatas blood above there, right? And you're not yotze the ola, because maybe the ola, which has got to be below, maybe all the ola went above. But you know you're yotze the chatas. Why? Because you took 15% of the blood. There was only 10% of the blood was ola blood. So if I took 15% of all the blood, I certainly got some chatas blood in there. We already explained that. That was the case above it, that we said there was ola with chatos that way. That was the way we explained Rav Ashi. We were trying to get out of it. That was all in the Havmina. It's a strange Gemara because that was all in the Havmina. When Rav Ashi claimed that according to Reb Lezer, Ein Bila. So how do you explain the idea that if you did some above, you can continue doing it below? The answer is that you're not yotze the ola at all. That's what we said ola and chatas. But maskana, because we said at the end that there's no proof for bila there at all, because we're not talking about liquids that got blended together in the same cup. We're talking about different cups, like we explained at the end of yesterday's daf, at the beginning of today's daf. Says the Mishnah, hanitnan bifnim. Now let's say, okay, we talk about inner karbanos, which are all chatos basically. Inner karbanos got mixed up just mit machutz. What do you do? What do you do? You can't do. You're not allowed to think. The remainder of the inner blood gets on the yisod, but the main blood, you mixed up a cup of blood of outer chatas with an inner chatas, right? What do? Yishafku. So and Rav Lezer doesn't even argue. You got to throw it all out. Yishafku lama, throw it down in the drain. Nas mechutz. Let's say you made a mistake and you put some on the outside. B'chasu nas mefnim kosher. Okay, if you did it all, so even though the inner blood had no place, you're not supposed to do it on the outer mizbeach. But at the end, if you did it on the outer mizbeach first, so you're yosei with the chatas blood there because we hold yesh bila, right? And then you did it on the inner one. Okay, you're kosher. But let's say you did it on the inner one first. You're not allowed to. What does the pasuk say? The pasuk says, "Vayikra vav pasuk chaf gimel kol chatas asher yuva bidama." If you bring chatos, any part of a chatos inside the heichal, no good. You got to destroy it. So here, if I took the chatos blood, I had two chatos, outer chatos and inner chatos got mixed up, and I first sprinkled it, the mixture I sprinkled inside. That's no good. I can't bring a chatos inside. Rabbi Kiva says it's puzzle. It's puzzle. Now, did I say the word chatos over here? He says hanit bifnim shenisavim b'chutz. This b'chutz bifnim is all chatos, right? But the outer ones could be any carbon. But Kiva says they're all puzzle. Any carbon that goes inside, even though the pasuk says over here kol chatos, a chatos that's brought inside the echel is puzzle. Rabbi Kiva learns out from the word b'chol, all carbonos. Rabbi Kiva says it's puzzle. B'chachamim machshirim. Rabbi Kiva omer. Kol damim shenichsu lechaper b'eichel is puzzle. The chaper means to atone. When you sprinkle, you get the atonement. B'chom omim chatos b'vad. Rabbi Lezer omer afa osham. Even osham is also why? Because the pasuk shenemer kachatos gosham, just like chatos blood, osham also too. But the chacham say no, only chatos, nothing else, not the other kabbanas. So beniflig nam says Gemara beniflig Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Lezer always argues with the chachamim. Two things get mixed up. Why doesn't Rabbi Lezer argue over here also? So Gemara says, hey, what should you do? Rabbi Lezer says, if it got mixed up, okay, do it this way, right? Do it above, do it below. What should you do? If you're going to do the blood outside on the outer mizbeach, then do the inner one. So you didn't bring the inner one. In other words, if you did the outer one first, you already got your kapara. You're not bringing the outer chatos inside to get a kapara. You already did the outer one outside, right? But this verse says, Kishem, Shemitzvah, Lahaktim El Yonah. There's a mitzvah we'll see later on. Karbanis is, if you have a chatos and older, you bring the chatos first. Learn out of a pasuk that you do the chatos above. Just like there's a mitzvah to do the upper one before the lower one. Kach mitzvah lahaktim pnim lechutz. If you have an inner carbon and an outer carbon, you got to do the inner one first. So Rabbi Elazar can't say if I mixed up an inner carbon and an outer carbon of blood, do the outer one first. You can't do that because the mitzvah is to do the inner one first, right? Nesiv, lifnim, so then we do the inside one and then do the outside one with this mixture. Well, kivin deika chatos va'osham. And as even if Rav Elazar doesn't hold like Rabbi Kiva, he holds like the Chacham, that only chatos is aser or chazashim. But since the chatos from asam, the chinitzim psulin lo psikule. In other words, he can't say, "Oh, I have a solution. Do the inner one first and then the outer one." No, because you can't do the inner one of a chatos. Chatos can't be, and therefore, when he says nitnin b'fnim shenesavru nitnin b'chutz. Right, but if the one that was bachutz was also a chatas, you can't bring it inside. So therefore, Rabbi Elazar doesn't disagree there. He would possibly agree if he holds like the chacham and not like Rabbi Kiva. He would possibly say that for other karbanos, if the outer one is not a chatas, maybe you could do that. Bring an outer chatas, let's say you had a bechor or an ol or something like that get mixed up with the carbon on the inside. So do the inside first. And then do the outside. Maybe Rabbi Elazar would say that, but he can't say that straight in the Mishnah because he says he can't give us a general solution and say do the inner one first do the inner mizbeach first, because if the outer one that was mixed up was a chatos outer one that you're not allowed to bring into the hechel because that would passel it. All right, we'll pick him here tomorrow, Mitzvah, from the two dots. Have a good day, Kultiv.
Is there any place in the Gemara that says who cleans up the walls of the Mizbeach? I mean, it's full of blood.
Yeah. So first of all, I would say something then. You let it go. First, maybe they washed the Mizbeach a little bit too. But when there was a story when the Romans, in the second Beis Hamikdash, when they destroyed everything, they took a lot of the booty from the Beis Hamikdash. A lot of the stuff, the zare and stuff like that. And one of the Tanoim or Meir, I think, who was visiting Rome, and he had access to that stuff, and he saw the parochas, right? The parochas that separated between the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kodeshim. He saw blood on there, on the parochas. In other words, remember, when you sprinkle the blood, you don't sprinkle on the parochas, sprinkle towards the parochas, but if some reach the parochas by mistake, that's okay. And he saw blood there. They didn't send it to the dry cleaners the day after Yom Kippur, like you do with your kittel. You understand? They left the blood up there. That was part of the beauty. In other words, even when the Kohanim had blood up to their knees, on their Pesach, that was the beauty of it. They said it's beauty. You're supposed to enjoy it. So it wasn't necessarily that they washed it all down afterwards.